I wake up before my alarm. I always do. The apartment is quiet in the way it gets when the building hasn't fully decided to be awake yet. Pipes ticking. A faint elevator groans somewhere below, and the soft hum of my refrigerator keeping time. Coffee first. Not because I need it, but because it's a small ritual that tells my body the day is ordered. I grind the beans by hand. The smell is honest, bitter, warm, predictable. I pour the water slowly, watch the bloom in the French press rise and settle like a controlled breath. On the counter, my phone lights up with a notification from my bank app. Security update completed. I didn't update anything. I stare at it for a moment longer than I should. Not panic, just irritation. The mild kind you get when someone moves your chair a few inches and calls it helping. I tap the notification. The app opens. A clean green screen. No warnings. No red banners. Just my balance sitting there like it always does. Everything looks normal. That's what makes it uncomfortable. Because in my experience, when something is wrong, the first thing it does is pretend it isn't. I set the phone face down next to my coffee and go through the motions. Toast, radio low. The same news recycled in different voices. I do not mention the notification to anyone. Not because I'm hiding it. Because I don't like giving small oddities more attention than they deserve until I know what they are. I walk 3 blocks to the little market I've used for years. Tuesdays are quiet there. Older people, a few mothers, the clerk who always calls everyone dear, without meaning anything by it. I buy the same things. Apples, eggs, plain yogurt, and a loaf of bread I don't even like that much but keep buying out of habit. At the register, I pull out my card the way I've done 1,000 times and insert it into the terminal. The machine beeps once, then again. The screen flashes. Processing. It takes longer than usual. Not dramatic, just longer. The clerk smiles politely. Sometimes it's slow. I nod once. No problem. The terminal beeps again and spits out a slip. Declined. Please try another method. It's a small humiliation. The kind you can swallow easily if you don't make a face. I don't make a face. I remove the card. Insert it again. This time the terminal asks for my PIN. I enter it. The screen changes. Call issuer. The clerk's smile tightens. It's not unkind, just cautious. People get strange when money doesn't behave. Not angry, worse. Curious. Do you have another card? She asks softly, like we're discussing a medical condition. I do, I say, and I keep my voice normal. I don't, actually. Not one I carry. I pull out my phone instead, open the banking app, and select mobile pay. It's a feature I keep for emergencies. I prefer plastic. I prefer something that doesn't need a signal. The phone hovers over the terminal. A beep. Approved. The clerk relaxes instantly. There we go. I gather my bag and receipt and step out into the cold air. I stand on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the winter bite reset my thoughts. One declined payment can be a glitch. 2 different prompts. Declined. Then call issuer. Paired with a mysterious security update notification. That isn't a random glitch. That is a system deciding something on my behalf, and not bothering to tell me until the moment it can embarrass me in public. Back home, I set the groceries away with the same precision I've always used. Eggs on the middle shelf. Apples in the bowl. Yogurt facing forward, labels visible. It's not obsession. It's evidence. You notice changes when you know how things are supposed to look. I sit at my desk and call the bank. Their automated menu has a cheerful voice that sounds like it was trained to make you feel safe. Press 1 for account balances, press 2 for transactions, press 3 for security concerns. I press 3. Music begins. A bright looping tune that suggests everything is fine if you just wait long enough. 6 minutes. Then 10. At 12 minutes, the line clicks. Thank you for calling, a woman says. This is Mia. How may I help you today? I give her my name and the last 4 digits. I describe the decline at the market without emotion. Just facts. Time, location, terminal message. There's a pause on the line. Typing. Okay, she says slowly. I see that. I wait. And I'm also seeing, she continues, a security restriction placed on your profile. By whom? I ask. Another pause. More typing. I forwarded everything to my attorney and waited. At 10:03, my phone rang again. This time, it was someone I knew. A former colleague. Quiet, careful, the kind of man who never calls unless something is already moving. I wanted you to hear this from me, he said. Your name came up in a cross-agency briefing this morning. I said nothing. They're not calling it an intervention, he continued. They're calling it a coordination. That gives them room. Room for what? I asked. For escalation without trigger. That phrase settled in my chest. Escalation without trigger means they don't need an incident. They don't need resistance. They only need alignment. They're testing response, he added. If you cooperate, they'll document compliance. If you hesitate, they'll document concern. So either way, I said, there's a record. Yes, I thanked him and hung up. Then I did something deliberate. I left my apartment. Not hurried, not evasive. I walked to a cafe I've visited for years, ordered the same coffee, paid in cash, and sat by the window where people could see me. I made a point of being seen. I read the paper. I nodded to the barista. I checked my watch. Normal behavior doesn't erase suspicion, but it complicates narratives. While I sat there, my phone vibrated twice. 2 missed calls. 2 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote. They are trying to move without touching me. That's when I understood the strategy fully. They weren't trying to confine me. They were trying to surround me. Create enough soft confirmations that action would feel inevitable rather than aggressive. If someone knocked on my door later, it wouldn't be a confrontation. It would be a formality. And formalities move quickly once initiated. I paid, stood, and walked home. When I reached my building, I noticed something new. A car across the street. Engine running. No markings. No obvious purpose. Not surveillance. Presence. I entered my apartment, locked the door, and checked my messages. The second voicemail was different. Same liaison as before. Same calm tone. But the language had shifted. We're concerned about a lack of response. Please understand that non-engagement can be interpreted in multiple ways. There it was. The pivot. Silence was no longer neutral. It was now a variable. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent one email. To everyone copied on the calendar invite. Short, clear, polite. I am aware of the coordination request. All communication should proceed through my legal representative. Please confirm receipt. No emotion. No refusal. Just structure. 5 minutes later, my attorney called. They weren't expecting that, he said. You just forced them to slow down. By how much? Enough to make them talk to each other first. I looked out the window at the car across the street. It was still there. Still idling. Waiting. That was fine. Because now they weren't just watching me. They were watching their own timing. And once timing becomes visible, it can be documented. They didn't knock that day. That was the first change. When institutions expect cooperation, they knock. When they're uncertain, they wait. By evening, the car across the street was gone. Not replaced. Not rotated. Just absent. That told me something important. The pause wasn't tactical, it was procedural. Someone, somewhere, had raised a hand and said not yet. I spent the night preparing, not in panic, but in sequence. I reviewed every document I had already assembled. I rechecked dates. I cross-referenced names. I printed 3 copies of my most recent cognitive assessment and placed them in 3 different folders, none of which were labeled in a way that invited curiosity. I didn't hide anything. I made it boring to misinterpret. The next morning, the move came, but sideways. At 8:41 a.m., I received an email from a different department. Not the one listed in the coordination invite. This one introduced itself as support services. That phrasing matters. Support implies consent. It implies assistance, not authority. The email was friendly, almost warm. We understand there may have been some confusion. Our role is simply to ensure that all parties feel heard and supported. No mention of safety, no mention of risk, no mention of prior reports. Instead, they attached a voluntary intake form. Voluntary is a legal hinge. Once you touch it, it swings both ways. A provider I hadn't changed. A prescription that hadn't changed. A problem that had never existed before. I asked who flagged it. They hesitated. An external note, the pharmacist said. We're just being careful. Careful is what systems say when they've been warned. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I thanked her, asked for the hold to be documented, and requested a written summary of the call. She agreed, relieved. People like it when you're calm. It reassures them they're on the right side. Next came my internet provider. A brief outage, then slower speeds, then a service email saying my account had been reviewed for unusual usage patterns. I knew that language. Unusual never means dangerous. It means noticed. I called, verified my identity, and asked a simple question. Has anyone contacted you expressing concern about my online activity or well-being? The representative paused. I'm not allowed to say who, she replied carefully, but there was a third-party inquiry. There it was again. Third-party. Concern. Inquiry. I logged it. Then came the social layer. A neighbor I've spoken to for years avoided eye contact in the elevator. Another asked, too casually, if I was doing okay. A friend canceled lunch, apologetic, saying they'd heard I needed rest. He didn't say from whom. He didn't need to. This is how it works. No single act is hostile. No single person is accountable. Each one believes they're helping. And that's what makes it effective. By the fourth day, I understood the shape of it. They weren't trying to confine me yet. They were thinning the ground beneath me. If something happened now, if I raised my voice, if I refused service, if I showed frustration, there would already be context waiting to receive it. A story pre-written, witnesses pre-aligned, language prepared. So I did the opposite. I expanded. I scheduled appointments, not with institutions tied to the reports, with neutral third parties, a private physician, a financial advisor, a community legal clinic. I showed up early. I spoke clearly. I asked for summaries. Every interaction became a mirror I controlled. Meanwhile, I adjusted my behavior in public. Not smaller, not quieter, deliberately normal. I greeted people. I made eye contact. I laughed when appropriate. I complained about traffic. Nothing dramatic, nothing defensive. Normality is harder to challenge than anger. That evening, I received a message from the liaison. Short, direct. We haven't heard back. Please understand delays can complicate outcomes. Complicate outcomes. That was the threat. I forwarded it to my attorney. He replied with one line. They're impatient. That night, I reviewed my records and noticed something new. A pattern in timing. Every contact, every delay, every concern. They all clustered around the same hours. Late morning, early evening, windows when intervention teams are staffed, when responses are fastest, when resistance can be reframed as escalation. This wasn't random. It was scheduled. I made one final call before sleeping. To a journalist I'd once helped quietly, years ago, when a story needed documents verified. I didn't tell him everything. I told him enough. Keep an eye on county filings, I said. If my name appears anywhere unusual, I'll need someone who understands paper trails. He didn't ask why. He said, send me whatever you have. I did. Then I waited. Because once isolation is attempted, the next move is exposure. And exposure cuts both ways. The exposure didn't come from the direction I expected. It came quietly, wrapped in procedure. At 9:12 the next morning, I received a voicemail from a municipal office I had never contacted before. The message was neutral, professional, and carefully rehearsed. Good morning. We're following up on a safety-related inquiry connected to your address. Please return our call to confirm availability. No accusation, no instruction, just presence. I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I checked my email. There it was, a calendar invitation, unrequested, Auto-generated. Titled, Wellness Check Coordination. No location. No agenda. Just a list of attendees. 2 names I recognized from prior paperwork. 1 department I didn't. And 1 line at the bottom that mattered most. Observer. External consultant. Observers aren't there to help. They're there to record. I asked neutral questions. I answered theirs calmly. I let her note, in writing, that I appeared oriented, articulate, and in full control of my finances. That sentence would matter later. Next, I stopped by my building manager's office. I didn't mention the visit. I mentioned maintenance. I'm updating my personal records, I said. Could you confirm there have been no noise complaints, disturbances, or safety concerns linked to my unit? He blinked. Checked the system. Nothing, he said. Never has been. Could you email that to me? I asked. He did. Paper beats rumor every time. On the way home, I noticed something else. A car I didn't recognize parked across the street. Unmarked. Engine off. Someone inside pretending to scroll. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. I didn't react. I walked past it normally, nodded at a neighbor, and went inside. That night, I slept fully dressed. Not because I expected a knock. Because I expected a timeline acceleration. And I was right. The next morning, I received an email. Not from the clinic, not from the liaison. From a regional legal intake office. Subject line. Request for clarification regarding capacity concerns. That phrase again. Concerns. Not findings. Not allegations. Not complaints. Concerns float. Concerns spread. The email was polite, clinical, and dangerous. It referenced multiple third-party reports, consistency of narrative, duty to assess risk, opportunity for voluntary cooperation. They invited me to schedule a discussion. Not an interview. Not a hearing. A discussion is where words are harvested and later reclassified. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called my attorney. Not a family lawyer. Not an elder care specialist. A regulatory defense attorney. The kind who understands systems because they've taken them apart before. I read him the email verbatim. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said one sentence. They're trying to build authority retroactively. Then he explained. They didn't have enough to act. So they were trying to create a record where my refusal would become the issue. Non-cooperation, resistance, evasion. All words that sound like symptoms when repeated by enough people. You don't go to that meeting, he said. You respond in writing. Through me. That mattered. Because once communication routes change, so does the power dynamic. Within the hour, he sent a formal reply. Clear, cold, precise. It stated, I denied all allegations of instability. I had undergone independent evaluation. Any further contact must be legally compelled. Any misrepresentation would be documented. No emotion. Just boundaries. That evening, my son called. I almost didn't answer, but avoidance would feed the narrative. So I picked up. Dad, he said quickly. Why are lawyers involved? Because people lied, I replied. They're worried about you, he insisted. You're making this worse. There it was. The inversion. Truth becomes escalation. Defense becomes proof. I'm documenting everything, I said calmly. Including this call. Silence. Then his voice dropped. You don't understand how this works, he said. I do, I replied. That's why you're nervous. He hung up. I wrote it down. Date, time, exact phrasing. Then I added a new section to my file. Escalation indicators. Because when systems fail to absorb you quietly, they switch strategies. Next comes one of 3 things. A formal order, a public incident, a manufactured emergency, and none of them happened by accident. I didn't know which one they were choosing yet, but I knew this much. They had stopped testing whether I was unstable. They were now testing whether I was isolated. And isolation is something they know how to create. Isolation doesn't begin with doors closing. It begins with access changing. The first thing that disappeared was convenience. My pharmacy called to say there was an issue verifying a refill I'd been taking for years. Nothing serious, they said. just a temporary hold until a provider confirmed continued need. Always plural, always vague, always safe. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a new folder on my computer and labeled it timeline. Not emotions, not interpretations, dates, calls, names, language used. I included exact phrases, pattern of reports, community safety, voluntary assessment, clarify concerns, protects everyone, because systems reuse language the way criminals reuse tools. If you know the phrases, you know the next move. The forensic psychologist's report arrived the next morning. 12 pages. Dense, methodical, no drama, no defensiveness, just assessments, cognitive function, intact, emotional regulation, appropriate, thought process, linear, goal-directed, no evidence of paranoia, delusion, or aggression. At the end, a sentence that mattered more than the rest. There is no clinical basis for involuntary intervention or concern for public safety. I printed 3 copies. One went into a sealed envelope. One went into my safe. The third stayed on my desk, face down, because I knew what was coming next. And it came faster than I expected. A knock at my door. Mid-morning. Weekday. The kind of timing chosen because it looks reasonable later. I didn't open it immediately. I looked through the peephole. 2 people. One man in a blazer without a badge. One woman holding a tablet. No uniforms. No authority displayed. Just posture. I opened the door halfway. "Good morning," the man said, smiling lightly. "We're here for a welfare check." There it was. Not an arrest. Not an evaluation. Not a demand. A check. "I'm fine," I said. "You can leave." The woman glanced at her tablet. "We just need to confirm that," she said. "I've already done that," I replied. Privately, the man tilted his head slightly, still calm. "We understand you declined the voluntary assessment." "I declined participation," I corrected. "Not evaluation." That confused them. People in systems don't like distinctions. Distinctions slow momentum. "We'd like to come in," he said. "No," I replied. The word landed cleanly. He didn't argue. He adjusted. "If you refuse," he said gently, "we'll have to document limited cooperation." "There's nothing to cooperate with," I said. "I'm not under obligation." The woman's fingers paused over the tablet. Silence stretched. Then she asked, "Are there any weapons in the home?" There it was. The pivot. From concern to risk. "No," I said. "Are you feeling angry right now?" she asked. "No." "Do you feel targeted or persecuted?" she continued. "No." She nodded slowly, typing. Every answer was being turned into tone. I reached behind me, picked up the envelope, and handed it to the man. "This is a clinical evaluation," I said. "Independent. Current. You may read it outside." He hesitated, took it. They stepped back into the hallway. The door closed. I listened. Pages turning. A low murmur. More silence. When the doorbell rang again, it was softer this time. The man spoke first. "This will be added to the file," he said. "Good," I replied. "So will everything else." He studied me for a moment. "Not like a threat, like a calculation. We may follow up," he said. "I expect you will," I replied. They left. I closed the door, locked it, and wrote the next line in my timeline. First physical contact attempt, neutralized by documentation. They hadn't trapped me, not yet, but now I knew something important. They were no longer asking if there was a problem. They were deciding how to justify one. After they left, I didn't sit down. Sitting would have meant relief, and relief makes you sloppy. Instead, I walked through my apartment slowly, as if I were seeing it for the first time through someone else's eyes. That's what systems do before they act. They don't look at you. They look at your environment and decide what story it supports. I noted everything that could be misread. The stack of books by the chair, not clutter, but research. The legal pads on my desk, not obsession, but organization. The quiet, not isolation, but routine. Still, I knew better than to trust interpretation. So I changed the frame. That afternoon, I invited witnesses into my life. Not friends who cared. Professionals who documented. First, I went to my bank in person. I asked for a printed statement of account status and requested a short meeting with the branch manager. Not to complain, just to confirm. We spoke for 10 minutes. I waited. 2 days later, a letter arrived by regular mail. Same language, same invitation, slightly firmer tone, a suggested date and time already filled in, as if my agreement were assumed. Still voluntary, still optional, but now documented. I called the number listed at the bottom. A man answered. Calm voice, practiced warmth. We just want to talk, he said. There's been a pattern of reports. Reports of what? I asked. Concerns, he replied easily. From whom? He didn't answer directly. Multiple sources, he said. That's usually when we step in early. Before anything escalates. Escalates into what? He didn't say. Instead, he added, this protects everyone. Including you. There it was again. Protection. Safety. Prevention. Words that don't mean what people think they mean. I'm not agreeing to anything, I said. That's your right, he replied smoothly. This is voluntary. But, I asked, but declining may limit our ability to document your perspective. That sentence was the hinge. If I went, they would write what they wanted. If I didn't, they would write what they wanted without me. Either way, a file would grow. That's how labyrinth systems work. There's no locked door at the start. Just corridors where every direction leads inward. After the call, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the library. Not to read. Libraries are excellent places for that, but to observe. People underestimate how much institutional behavior you can see just by watching how forms are filled out, how desks are arranged, how questions are phrased. I requested public information on community risk reporting protocols. The librarian didn't look surprised. She just pointed me to a terminal. I learned 3 things very quickly. First, once 3 independent concern reports exist, agencies are allowed to share impressions even if no incident has occurred. Second, aggressive does not require violence. It can mean persistent questioning, refusal to accept explanations, or fixation on procedural detail. That one almost made me smile. Third, and this was the most important, no single report matters. Patterns do. Patterns are subjective. Patterns can be shaped. Patterns don't need proof. By the time I left the library, I understood the shape of the trap. They weren't trying to lock me away. They were trying to define me. Because once a person is defined as unstable, every action becomes evidence. Ask questions, obsession, refuse meetings, avoidance, stay calm, emotional suppression, get angry, confirmation. I went home and sat at my desk for a long time without turning on the light. Then I did the one thing they didn't expect. I initiated contact, on my terms. Not with the coordinator, not with social services, not with my family, with a professional whose job existed outside the system they were building. A forensic psychologist, private practice, no institutional contracts, no reporting obligations unless there's immediate danger. I booked an evaluation, paid in advance, requested a full written report. If they were going to build a narrative, I was going to build a counter record, clean, clinical, and boring enough to hold weight. Because systems don't fear outrage. They fear documentation that doesn't match. And I had a feeling the next step wouldn't be another invitation. It would be an assumption. The call came 3 days after my private evaluation. Not from the coordinator, from my primary care clinic. That mattered. Clinics don't call about opinions. They call about files. The nurse spoke carefully, the way people do when they've been instructed to sound neutral. We've received an information request regarding your recent health history, she said. Nothing alarming, just routine. From whom? I asked. There was a pause, a keyboard click. A regional behavioral liaison, she said. They're coordinating services. Coordinating. Another soft word. I didn't authorize any release, I said. That's why I'm calling, she replied quickly. They're requesting confirmation of stability, not records. A professional impression. Impressions don't require consent. They require proximity. I'll handle it, I said. Please note that. I will, she replied. But her voice told me she already had. That afternoon, my son texted me for the first time in weeks. Just checking in. People are worried about you. People. May I ask why you need everything? No, I said, politely. She told me it would be ready in 5 business days. I thanked her and hung up. 5 days was too long. So I called again an hour later and asked a different question. Has anyone contacted the office recently with concerns about my mental state? Silence. Then, one moment, please. The line went quiet, but not fully. I could hear typing, a chair shifting. When she came back, her voice had changed. We're not authorized to discuss that over the phone. That was confirmation enough. Next, I called my pharmacy. I asked a simple question. Have there been any changes to my profile? The pharmacist hesitated. No prescription changes, he said carefully. But, I prompted. But there was a note added last week, he admitted. Non-clinical. What kind of note? He lowered his voice, even though we weren't in the same room. A caution flag. Behavioral. It doesn't affect dispensing, but it's there. Who added it? I can't see the name, he said. Just that it came from a provider. Provider. Singular. That narrowed things down. By noon, I had enough pieces to stop guessing. This wasn't about money directly. It wasn't about inheritance. And it wasn't about putting me somewhere, not yet. This was pre-containment. You don't lock the door first. You make sure no one believes the person inside when they knock. In the afternoon, I visited my sister. Not announced. Not confrontational. She opened the door looking surprised, then relieved. Oh, good, she said. I was meaning to call you. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. We sat at her kitchen table. Tea appeared without asking. Familiar motions. Comfortable habits. You've seemed off lately, she said gently, wrapping her hands around her mug. Off how? I asked. She waved a hand vaguely. Distracted. Forgetful. You missed Mom's anniversary lunch. I told you I wasn't coming, I said. She frowned. You never told me that. Yes, I said calmly. I did. By text. 2 weeks earlier. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, I'm just worried about you. There it was again. Concern. Did you talk to my doctor? I asked. Her eyes flicked up, then away. Someone had to, she said quietly. You won't listen to us. I repeated. She sighed. You scare people sometimes. I waited. You get intense, she continued. You ask questions. You don't let things go. It's not normal at your age. At your age, that's when I felt it settle into place. They hadn't accused me of being incompetent. They hadn't said I was dangerous. They had said I was unpredictable. Unpredictable people make institutions nervous. And nervous institutions act preemptively. I didn't report you to hurt you, she said quickly. It was just a wellness check. A few forms. Everyone does it. Where? I asked. She hesitated, then said the names like she was reading from memory. Doctor. Bank. Local social services intake line. 3 stations. Enough to create a pattern. Enough to make the system lean forward and pay attention. You didn't think to tell me, I said. You wouldn't have understood, she replied. You get defensive. I stood up. She reached for my arm. Please don't be angry. I'm not, I said truthfully. I'm paying attention. That night, back in my apartment, I opened a new folder. Not digital, paper. Every call, every name, every date. Because once concern is on file, facts become optional. And if I didn't start building my own record now, I would be explaining myself later to people who had already decided who I was. The next move didn't come from my family. That's what surprised me. It came from an email. Subject line. Follow-up regarding community safety report. No accusation. No threat. Just a phrase that sounds administrative enough to ignore, if you don't know how these things work. The sender was a regional coordinator. No badge number. No title that carried weight on its own. That's deliberate. Titles create responsibility. Coordinators create distance. The email thanked me for my cooperation so far. That was interesting, because I hadn't cooperated with anything. It invited me to a voluntary assessment meeting. Not mandatory, not urgent, just recommended. A chance, they said, to clarify concerns and ensure appropriate support. Support is the word they always use when they want compliance without resistance. I didn't reply. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the word without adopting it. Why don't you come with me? Her office wasn't an office, not really. Just a glass-walled corner with a desk and 2 chairs. Transparent enough to look honest. Private enough to be effective. She sat, opened her computer, and typed while I waited. I see here, she said eventually, that your account was flagged for review. By whom? I asked again. She didn't answer directly. It's an automated process. What triggered it? She paused, then looked at me for the first time instead of her screen. Multiple indicators, she said. Nothing you need to worry about. I let that sit. I need access to my funds, I said. Today. I understand, she replied, and the phrase landed exactly like the one before it. But until the review is completed, we can't lift the limitations. And how long does the review take? She glanced at her screen. It varies. Based on what? Based on the findings. There it was again. Circular language. No handles. No edges. Karen, I said, keeping my voice level, I've banked here for 23 years. My income is documented. My expenses are consistent. There has been no fraud, no missed payments, no disputes. If you're going to restrict my access, I want to know why. She studied me for a moment, not unkindly. Off the record, she said quietly, these reviews usually start because of external inputs. I didn't interrupt. Information shared between institutions, she continued. Risk assessments, compliance alerts, shared by whom? I asked. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. I can't see the source, she said carefully. Only that it was classified as credible. Credible. That word is dangerous when no one defines it. Can I contest it? I asked. She smiled then, the kind of smile meant to soothe. The process will resolve itself once all verifications are complete. I leaned back slightly in the chair. You're asking me to wait, I said. Yes, without access to my money. Yes, without knowing what I'm accused of. She didn't correct me. Instead, she said, it's not an accusation. That was the moment I understood something important. If it isn't an accusation, it doesn't require evidence. And if it doesn't require evidence, it doesn't require defense. That afternoon, I went home and started making calls. Not angry calls, not confrontational ones, careful calls. First, I phoned my insurance provider. Everything there was fine, the agent said cheerfully. No changes, no notes, no alerts. Then my pension administrator. Also fine. Payments scheduled as usual. Then I called the credit bureau, requested my own report. When it arrived by email an hour later, I read it slowly. Most of it was unchanged. Accounts, history, scores, but near the bottom, in a section most people never look at, was a line I didn't recognize. Additional monitoring recommended. Third-party notice on file. No explanation, no source, just a recommendation. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind was mapping patterns. Banks don't act alone. Neither do credit agencies. And they don't move unless someone pushes, or warns, or files something that forces their hand. By morning, I knew where to look next. Not at institutions, at people. And there were only a few people in my life who had both proximity and motive. I didn't confront anyone right away. That would have been a mistake. Systems don't move because of emotion. They move because of paperwork, timing, and patterns that look reasonable when viewed from a distance. If someone had started this, they didn't do it by shouting or accusing. They did it by reporting concern. Concern is the cleanest weapon there is. I made a list on paper, not on my computer. Names only. No commentary. There were 3. 2 relatives. 1 professional. I started with the professional, because professionals leave trails even when they think they're being discreet. My primary care physician's office picked up on the second ring. The receptionist recognized my name immediately. I need a copy of my full medical record, I said, including notes, correspondence, and third-party communications from the last 6 months. There was a pause. That can take some time, she said. I'm aware, I replied. I'll wait. Another pause, longer this time. It's an internal safeguard, she says. That phrase, internal safeguard, means nothing and everything. It's language designed to stop questions. I didn't request any safeguards, I say. I understand, she replies, and her tone shifts into something softer. Not empathy, protocol. This is for your protection. Protection from what? I ask. She hesitates. That matters. From unusual activity, she says. My activity is not unusual, I tell her. More typing. Sir, she says, careful now, the system flagged your account for additional verification. We just need to confirm a few details. Go ahead, I say. She asks routine questions. Mother's maiden name, address, last transaction. I answer all of them without looking at any paperwork. This is my life. It's not a quiz. Thank you, she says. One moment while I remove the restriction. I wait. The silence stretches. Then she returns. I'm sorry, she says, and the words land heavier than they should. I can't remove it from my level. What level can? I ask. A branch manager or our security department, she says. How do I reach the security department? I ask. We don't have a direct line for customers, she replies, smoothly. Of course. Then book me a branch appointment, I say. I can schedule that, she says quickly, grateful I've chosen the hallway they built for me. The earliest slot is Thursday at 2:30 p.m. 2 days. I need access today, I tell her. I'm sorry, she repeats. Until the review is complete, your account may have temporary limitations. Temporary, I say. Defined by what? It depends on the outcome, she says. I hold the phone a little away from my ear for a second, not because she's loud, but because the shape of this is becoming clear. A system has decided I need review. Not because I did something wrong. Because it can. I hang up politely. I don't slam the phone. I don't swear. I don't pace. I open my banking app again. My balance is still there. The numbers are fine. But when I tap transfer, the button that always worked before, a new message appears. Some features are currently unavailable. Contact your branch. I stare at the screen and feel something settle. It isn't fear. It's recognition. This isn't about fraud. This is about control. And control, when it begins, rarely announces its real reason. By Wednesday morning, the word temporary had started to feel dishonest. Not dramatic, just inaccurate. Temporary suggests something is waiting to resolve itself. Like weather, or traffic. This felt more like a door that had been quietly locked while I was still inside the room. I woke up early again and checked my phone before coffee, breaking my own rule. No new notifications, no explanations, just the same green banking app screen pretending nothing had changed. I decided to test the edges. First, I tried to pay a utility bill. The website accepted my login, accepted my account number, accepted my confirmation click, and then refreshed into a polite gray message informing me the transaction couldn't be completed at this time. No error code, no appeal button, just a suggestion to contact support. I closed the browser and sat still for a moment, hands flat on the desk. This is how systems behave when they want you to move somewhere specific. Not fix anything. Just relocate yourself into the channel they control. So I put on my coat and went to the bank in person. The branch was 10 minutes away, a glass-fronted building that had replaced an old post office years ago. Inside, everything was designed to look open and calm. No walls, no doors, just low desks and friendly colors. A young man at the entrance smiled and asked what brought me in. I need to speak to a manager, I said. He nodded, already reaching for a tablet. Do you have an appointment? No. His smile didn't fade. but it hardened slightly around the edges. "We're pretty booked today. I was told to come in," I said, which was true enough to matter. He hesitated, then gestured toward a seating area. "Have a seat. I'll see what I can do." I sat where he pointed, close enough to the desks to hear fragments of other people's conversations. Mortgage questions, card replacements, someone crying quietly into a tissue. After 15 minutes, a woman in her 40s approached me. Professional posture, neutral expression. "I'm Karen," she said. "I understand there's a security issue with your account." "Restriction," I corrected. "Your colleague called it a restriction." I didn't open the attachment. Instead, I forwarded the email to my attorney with a single line. Note language shift. Attempting soft entry. He replied within minutes. "They're trying to reset the frame," he wrote. "They overplayed early. Now they want you to self-identify. Self-identification is dangerous. It turns observation into participation." I declined politely, not by saying no, but by asking for clarification. "Please specify the statutory basis for this request and whether submission constitutes record creation." I CC'd everyone. That was enough. At 11:17, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a liaison. It was someone from my past. A relative I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Not close, not hostile, peripheral. They didn't greet me. They asked, "Are you okay?" That question is never neutral when it arrives at the wrong moment. "I'm fine," I said. There was a pause. "They're worried about you," the voice continued. "People are saying you've been isolated." Isolated. That word had been planted. I didn't argue. I asked a question instead. "Who told you to call?" Another pause. Then honesty slipped through. They asked if I'd check in. Just casually. Casual doesn't leave records. That's why they use it. I thanked them for calling and ended the conversation. Then I wrote another line in my notebook. "They are outsourcing concern." That's when I realized the shape of the next phase. They were no longer testing me. They were testing the environment. Neighbors, relatives, peripheral contacts. They were seeing how easily worry could be echoed. How fast a story could become communal. I stood by my window again, watching the street. No car, no presence, because now the work wasn't happening outside. It was happening between people. And that's harder to trace, unless you expect it. Which I did, because this wasn't my first time watching a system try to move without leaving fingerprints. And it wouldn't be their last attempt. They didn't push me next. They pushed around me. Within 48 hours, the temperature changed in small, precise ways. Not dramatic, not obvious, just enough to register if you were trained to notice shifts instead of events. The woman downstairs, who usually barely nodded, asked if I'd been sleeping well. The building manager sent a polite email reminding residents that support resources are available for anyone feeling overwhelmed. A neighbor I'd never spoken to left a pamphlet on the lobby table about community wellness groups. None of it mentioned my name. That was the point. This is how narratives mature. They stop needing a source. I didn't react. Reaction feeds confirmation. Instead, I adjusted posture. That afternoon, I went out deliberately. Same time I always did. Same route. I bought coffee, spoke to the clerk by name, exchanged a few banal comments about the weather. Predictability is the enemy of escalation. When I returned, there was a notice taped near the mailboxes. A community listening session, hosted by an external facilitator. Attendance encouraged. Topic: building safety and mutual awareness. No authority, no accusation, just implication. They were building consensus without confrontation, creating a backdrop where concern looked reasonable and resistance looked suspicious. That evening, my attorney called. "They're trying to social proof the record," he said. "If enough people feel something's off, paperwork becomes easier." "Next step?" I asked. "Either you disappear into silence," he said, "or you reassert presence, publicly, calmly, with witnesses." Witnesses. That's when I understood the mistake they'd made. They assumed isolation. They hadn't checked continuity. The next morning, I emailed the building manager. Short, neutral, documented. I've noticed increased third-party inquiries regarding my well-being. For clarity and record integrity, please direct any concerns to my counsel. I am fully capable of managing my affairs. No emotion, no defensiveness, just jurisdiction. Then I did something they didn't expect. I attended the session, not to speak, to be seen. I arrived early, sat near the front, greeted the facilitator by name, and took notes openly. When discussion turned vague, phrases like, some residents, and, general safety, I raised my hand once. Only once. I'd like the record to reflect, I said calmly, that no incidents involving me have occurred, and no authority has contacted me directly regarding risk or instability. If that changes, I expect formal notice. The room went quiet, not hostile, not supportive, just alert. That's the moment group momentum stalls, when ambiguity meets specificity. After the session, 2 people approached me. One apologized for assuming. The other said nothing, just nodded, as if recalibrating. By evening, the ripple was visible. A system built on implication doesn't survive clarity. At 9:03 p.m., an email arrived from the original coordination address. Subject line: Status update. 3 sentences. Thank you for your engagement. At this time, no further action is required. We will remain available should circumstances change. Remain available. That's institutional language for retreat without admission. I closed my laptop and wrote the final line for the day. They needed me to be quiet. I stayed precise. This wasn't over, but the perimeter had shifted. And now they knew something essential. I wasn't confused. I wasn't isolated. And I wasn't alone in the room when stories were told. The last move didn't come from them. It came from the system correcting itself. 3 days after the session, I received a certified letter, not accusatory, not alarming. Administrative. It acknowledged receipt of my clarification, confirmed no active case, and stated that all informal notes connected to my name were being archived as unsubstantiated community concern. That phrase matters. It's how institutions quietly admit error without admitting fault. I knew what it meant because I'd used similar language myself, years ago, when a file needed to disappear without consequences rippling outward. Nothing was reversed. Nothing was corrected. The narrative was simply rendered inert. I didn't celebrate. I verified. Through counsel, I requested confirmation from every node that had been touched: municipal services, housing administration, the contracted facilitator. Each reply came back consistent. No open action. No monitoring. No pending evaluation. Clean closure. The people who started it didn't reach out again. Not to explain. Not to apologize. Silence, in situations like this, isn't shame. It's self-preservation. Any acknowledgement would create a record they could no longer control. That suited me. Over the following weeks, the environment normalized. The questions stopped. The pamphlets disappeared. The building manager returned to discussing elevator maintenance and package theft. The story dissolved because it no longer had oxygen. That's how these things end. Not with vindication, but with absence. I made one final adjustment. I documented everything. Not obsessively. Methodically. Timeline. Copies. Names. Phrases used. Points of convergence. The exact moment implication replaced fact. The moment clarity interrupted momentum. I sealed it, labeled it, and stored it where it would remain untouched unless needed. Not because I expected a sequel. Because systems repeat patterns. People think justice is dramatic. It isn't. Justice is procedural. It's what happens when you refuse to panic, refuse to disappear, and refuse to surrender authorship of your own story. They tried to describe me without me present. That was their error. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't run. I stayed observable. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. Calm justice doesn't shout. It keeps records.